The second law clerk, who served as Jackson's only assistant, these were all solo law clerks, from the spring of 1945 when Phil Neal ditched the boss until 2 summers later, is Murray Gartner. Murray is a native of New York City, a graduate of New York University. He too then became a student at Harvard Law School, and it sounds pedestrian to pile one after the next. He too became president of the Harvard Law Review. Robert Jackson was not a credential guy, but he was a substance and talent guy, and he also had a scout in the Harvard Law School, frankly. His son, William Eldred Jackson, was a classmate and friend and law review colleague of Phil Neal and Murray Gartner. And Bill Jackson played a role in facilitating the interviews and vouching for the quality and ultimately being a conduit to the clerkship, first of Phil and then of Murray Gartner. Murray's work for Jackson both included work for Jackson and absence from work by Jackson, because Murray's clerkship began in April of 1945, only a couple of weeks before an emissary, Sam Rosenman, on behalf of President Truman, came up to the court and officially asked Jackson to undertake a task that had been in the planning stages of President Roosevelt for some time, which was to begin and superintend and control the negotiation process among the Allies regarding what to do with the captured surviving Nazi leaders now that the war was virtually won. In other words, Nuremberg. And so Murray was hired, and then Jackson ditched the law clerk. During the year when Jackson was away from the court on the assignment that became the Nuremberg prosecution, Murray Gartner, I think, really did 2 jobs, although he's too modest to put it this way. He stayed in the trench doing the preparatory work, reviewing petitions, writing memos, and being poised to assist Jackson if Jackson had come back to, in a quick hitter session or on a full-time basis, resume his work as a justice, which was a prospect that loomed over that year. Jackson underestimated the length of time that Nuremberg would take and wished to get back and knew that his colleagues wished to get him back, and heard that there were a lot of cases dividing 4-4 that needed him to get back. And Murray had all of that in great readiness, but Jackson never came back. Having an elbow, the other thing that Murray did was get grabbed by Felix Frankfurter and effectively became a deputized extra clerk in the Frankfurter chambers and worked closely with that extraordinary figure. And then at the end of the process in the summer of 1946, Jackson returned, and Murray Gartner continued to serve as his law clerk for the next term of the court. And so, in a particularly unique way, Murray knew Jackson before and after Nuremberg, and his remarks today were wonderful. Following his clerkship, Murray Gartner, classmate and friend and successor of Phil Neal, got the pitch about the Bay Area, and he too became a San Francisco lawyer for a period of time, but then returned to public service in another interesting, momentous moment. He went to Paris in 1950 and was there for a couple of years, working as one of the counsel on the Marshall Plan in the State Department. And so in terms of playing a role in the peace, as Phil did in the United Nations work, Murray did in the Marshall Plan work in Europe. Following that service, Murray returned to New York and became a very successful private practicing attorney, a partner in the Proskauer law firm, a very prominent, successful labor lawyer. On top of all that, Murray Gartner has devoted much energy and effort over the years to studying Robert Jackson. He too is deeply expert in this man and is part of the work that many of us are engaged in to understand, to study, to write, to promulgate the message of Robert Jackson. So it was a pleasure to have Murray Gartner in the roundtable today, and it's an honor to introduce him this evening.